Number 1.
Quisenberry was last seen in Thomasville, Georgia sometime during June 1989. Witnesses saw her boyfriend, Jerry Robert Hobbs, carrying her over his shoulder at a shelter for battered women. Hobbs later stated they were in a trailer on Lost Arrowhead Lane off Carter Road, near Stewart Road, and Quisenberry got drunk and passed out. He left, and when he returned, she was gone. She has never been heard from again. Quisenberry's loved ones reported her missing in August 1989. Her daughter was pregnant at the time of her disappearance, and they kept in close contact, and Quisenberry also was in regular touch with her sisters. Her family believed she'd met with foul play. There was a history of domestic violence between Quisenberry and Hobbs. The investigation into Quisenberry's case was reopened in 2009, and blood was found in the trailer she disappeared from. In May 2009, Hobbs was arrested and charged with her murder. He told police that whatever happened between himself and Quisenberry was between him and God. In June, however, the case against Hobbs was dismissed for lack of evidence, and he was released. He moved to Washington state and is now deceased. Foul play is suspected in Quisenberry's case due to the circumstances involved.
Number 2.
Randall had drug and alcohol problems in 1982 and led a transient lifestyle, hitchhiking around the United States. She lived in New York and Texas in the early 1980s. Randall called her mother at the latter's residence in Delray Beach, Florida on October 24, 1982. She said that she was traveling with a driver from Delco Trucking and was en route to visit her mother in Florida. She never arrived and never contacted her mother again. Randall's mother reported her daughter as a missing person to the Delray Beach Police Department in 1986, 4 years after she last spoke to her. Her mother said that she feared foul play was involved in her daughter's disappearance, as Randall usually maintained regular contact with her mother. Randall did not have a mailing address due to her lifestyle at the time of her disappearance, so Delray Beach authorities have handled her case from the onset. Her mother received a letter from a man in Forest Park, Georgia in 1995, 13 years after Randall was last seen. The man stated that he was a friend of her daughter, and he was attempting to return a scrapbook Randall left at his residence in 1982. Authorities spoke to the friend, who said that Randall stayed at his home in late October to early November 1982. Randall told the friend that she had been traveling with a driver from Anco Trucking from Flushing, New York. Randall stated she and the driver had an argument regarding her alcohol intake and parted ways in Forest Park, Georgia in late October 1982. She was attempting to hitchhike to her mother's residence in Florida at that time. Randall's friend stated that she lived in his home for approximately 3 weeks. He discovered that she left his residence sometime during November 1982. The friend's neighbor said that Randall requested a ride to Interstate 285 while her roommate was out. She apparently wanted to continue her journey to Florida and told the neighbor she planned to hitchhike to Interstate 75, which runs through Florida. The neighbor told authorities that Randall carried several t-shirts and pairs of jeans with her in a nylon bag when he dropped her off on the highway. Randall's social security number has not been used since October 1982. Authorities believe foul play was involved in her case. She has never been heard from again.
Number 3.
Losing a loved one is devastating enough, but not knowing where they are or what happened to them is unthinkable. That's what Allyson Romedy's family has lived with since she disappeared 6 years ago today. We hear about missing person cases all the time, and too often, it seems they turn out to be false reports. That's made Allyson Romedy's family very upset. Allyson's mother told WTOC she feels it's cost them precious time in the search for her missing daughter. "That's what my life revolves around, is the need to find her," said Becky Becton. For 6 years, Becton has imagined and feared the worst about her daughter, Allyson. "She would never stay away from her family for 6 years without us knowing where she is," she said. On February 28, 2002, Allyson Romedy tucked her then 10-year-old daughter Mallory into bed. No one ever saw Allyson again. Police searched, bringing in helicopters and dogs. No tip went unchecked, but still no sign of Allyson. She had been missing for 4 years by the time David Schofield became Rincon's police chief. They're still investigating along with the GBI. "Every once in a while we'll get some information or they'll get some information," said Chief Schofield, but so far we've not been able to bring it to a positive conclusion. Police deal with missing person cases regularly, but Allyson's family feels the ones that aren't legitimate are hurting cases like theirs. That's one of the things we were told the day after she disappeared. "Oh, don't worry. This happens all the time. She'll come home. She'll come back in a day or two. That happens a lot. That had a real bearing on our case the first few days, explained Becton. Could those first few days have made a difference? Unfortunately, Allyson Romedy's family will never know. I just want her, said Becton. I want to know what happened. I really don't feel like our family can really, truly move on until we get the answers. She can only hope, even now, years later, someone who knows something will come forward. I think the person who is responsible is still living right here in Rincon, Georgia, she said. They're walking the streets every day. People here don't even realize they might be standing next to him in line at the grocery store, the drug store or the filling station, but yes, I think he's right here. Allyson's family thinks she is no longer alive. 3 months after her disappearance, her adult son, Michael, was killed in a car accident. The family posted his obituary notice in major newspapers all over the country, but never heard anything from Allyson. They say they know something happened to her because Allyson cared too much about her family to have missed his funeral. If you have any information about what may have happened to Allyson Romedy, call the Georgia Bureau of Investigation at 912.971.1121 or Rincon Police at 912.826.5200. You can also contact Crime Stoppers at 912.234.2020. You could be eligible for a reward up to $7,500 for information leading to an arrest in this case.
Number 4.
Rountree was last heard from on September 16, 2004, as he was departing Perimeter Mall, the vicinity of the 3700 block of Ashford Dunwoody Road in Atlanta, Georgia. He may have been carrying a briefcase at the time. He was on the way to visit one of his title pawn stores in Noonan, Georgia, but never arrived there. He has never been heard from again. His car, a dark blue four-door 1998 Pontiac Bonneville with Georgia license plates numbered APB 7793, is also missing. Rountree's loved ones say it is uncharacteristic of him to leave without warning. He owned 5 title pawn stores in northern Georgia which were very important to him, and they do not believe he would walk away from them without making arrangements for their upkeep. His credit cards have not been used since his disappearance, and his passport was left behind. His last cellular phone call was made near a phone tower in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Rountree's family hired a private investigator to try to find him after his disappearance. They complained that the police seemed uninterested in his case. They theorized that he met with foul play as the result of his title pawn businesses. He had been threatened occasionally because of his work. However, there is no hard evidence of foul play in Rountree's case. His disappearance remains unsolved.
Number 5.
Born on June 14, 1966, Georgia native Terry Eugene Rouse was 24 years old when he was last seen or heard from by anyone. In the early morning hours, between 5:30 and 6 a.m., on May 11, 1991, Terry left a party he had been attending at a residence on Swamp Road in Waycross, Ware County. Later in the day, a Georgia state trooper found Terry's light blue Ford Thunderbird parked near the entrance of Akefinakee Swamp Park, engine running with the radio playing, and a window rolled down. Inside the car were Terry's clothes and a few other personal effects. Terry himself was nowhere to be found. But the Ware County Sheriff's Department kept Terry's missing person case open and kept searching for him. Early on in the case, the investigating detectives zeroed in on one main suspect, Terry's cousin and best friend, Craig Lester Thrift. Terry and Craig were both employed in the Thrift family's concrete finishing business. They used to drink together and hang out all over the town and around the Akefinakee swamp. The reason that Craig became a suspect in the case was that Terry was allegedly having an affair with Craig's wife Rhonda. When Craig was brought in for questioning in 1997, 6 years after Terry's disappearance, he refused to take the polygraph test. Apparently, Craig told the investigating officers, "Without a body, you don't have anything, and I'm not taking a test." The investigators believed that Terry was killed and his body thrown into the swamp, though their search of the swamp and surrounding areas never turned up anything. As reported by the Florida Times-Union, Ware County Sheriff Randy Royal confirmed that his office had consulted with Waycross Judicial Circuit D. Eric Curry during the investigation and made sure they had enough evidence to charge and prosecute Craig. In March 2012, 21 years after Terry went missing, the authorities arrested Craig Lester Thrift and charged him with the murder of his first cousin, even though they did not have a body. When they arrested him and searched his home at 116 Trout Street in Woodbine, the police found marijuana and firearms. Craig was charged with possession of marijuana with intent to distribute and possession of a firearm in the commission of a crime by the Camden County Sheriff's Office. During the trial, the jury heard conflicting statements from Craig's current and former wives, Robin and Rhonda Thrift respectively. While his ex-wife Rhonda, the one alleged to have had an affair with Terry, claimed that Craig had been partying and drinking with her the entire night, and then directly headed to bed in the morning, several other witnesses including Craig's then-wife Robin, testified that Craig had told them that he had beaten up, shot, and killed his cousin Terry. According to Robin and many other witnesses, Craig often told them that he had killed Terry so that he could intimidate them. One witness, Aubrey Taylor, testified that Terry had told him that he was going to skip town to avoid going to court on a DUI charge, and also because he was in debt that he couldn't repay. Without the body, the jury couldn't be certain about what had happened to Terry. But so many people testified against Craig's bragging about being the murderer that it was enough to convict him. In 2014, 2 years after his arrest, Craig Lester Thrift was convicted of felony murder in the disappearance and presumed death of Terry Rouse, and got a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 7 years, counting the 2 years he had already spent in jail during his trial.
Number 6.
Carol was last seen in Rossville, Georgia, just south of the Tennessee border, on April 9, 1977. She and her husband of 1 year, James Ronald Skidmore, and her 5-year-old son Lindale Mahaffey, one of the 4 children she had from a previous marriage, had left their Texas home to visit James' parents in Rossville on March 29 in order to put their marriage back together. The last time Carol's parents heard from her was on April 9, when she spoke to them on the phone and said she wasn't sure when she'd be coming home. All 3 of them disappeared together. On May 5, Lynn's body was found in Parksville Lake in Cleveland, Texas. He'd been there for several weeks. The child was the victim of a homicide. His body was found wrapped in a plastic bag and weighted with a 40-pound rock. It wasn't identified until June 13. By then, his stepfather had also been found deceased. James was found dead of a drug overdose in a hotel room in Harrison, Arkansas on June 1. He had died by suicide. He wrote a letter to his former wife, telling her he was going to take his own life because things weren't working out for him. There was no sign of Carol. She has never been heard from again. Due to the circumstances involved in her disappearance, foul play is suspected in Carol's case. She is from Texas, and Texas police are investigating her disappearance.